Don't even start, Wyatt Earp. You can come sit on my lap if you want. You get up here. You can't cry while I'm trying to read a book, motherfucker. You can come up here on my lap. Come up here on my lap. Just don't cry. You can't be interrupting the podcast with your cries. With your crybaby cries. Don't. Like, you can sit here and you can be loved. But we gotta read this fucking book, bro. Ow! No, you cannot need my fucking inner thigh. That is not, ow, that is not, you can't do that. Hey man, hey, I understand whatever the hell that is, but like, that's loving to you, but slicing into my flesh is not fucking loving to me, Wyatt Earp. You can't make me cry either, buddy. Just chill. We're reading a book about a dog. And maybe you don't like that, but that's what we're doing. We're on chapter 4, Wyatt Earp. Ow. Stop fucking sticking your claws in my fucking leg. You're more than welcome to go away. But stop sticking claws into my inner thigh. It's very fleshy and tender. There you go. Settle down. There you go, Wyatt Earp. Chapter 4, called While. Who has won to mastership? Wyatt Earp, stop sticking your claws inside of me. God damn. Ow. God, hey, you gotta stop that shit. We're trying to read a book. Just curl up and go to sleep. For fuck's sakes, stop kneading the inside of my thigh. I'm gonna punch you right between the eyes. Not really, but, like, can you just be content without that? What? What I say? I speak true when I say that but two devils. That's obviously Franco. This was Franco's speech next morning when he discovered Spitz missing and Buck covered with wounds. He drew him to the fire and by its light pointed them out. That Spitz fight like hell, said Perrault, as he surveyed the gaping rips and cuts. And that Buck fight like two hells, was Franco's answer. And now we make good time. No more Spitz, no more trouble, sure. While Perrault packed the camp outfit and loaded the sled, the dog driver proceeded to harness the dogs. Buck trotted up to place Spitz. Buck trotted up to the place Spitz would have occupied as the leader, but Franco, not noticing him, brought Solex to the coveted position. Buck thought he was top dog, and then he brought the old retired man up to the front. In his judgment, Solex was the best lead dog left. Buck sprang upon Solex in a fury, driving him back and standing in his place. Franco cried, slapping his thighs gleefully. Look at that Buck. Him kill that Spitz, him think he take that job. Go away, Chut, he cried. But Buck refused to budge. He took Buck by the scruff of his neck, and though the dog growled threateningly, dragged him to one side and replaced Solex. The old dog did not like it. He showed plainly that he was afraid of Buck. Franco was obdurate, but when he turned his back, Buck again displaced Solix, who was not unwilling to go. Franco was angry. "Now by God, fixed you!" he cried, coming back with a heavy club in his hand. Buck remembered the man in the red sweater and retreated slowly. Nor did he attempt to charge in when Solix was once more brought forward. But he circled just beyond the range of the club, snarling with bitterness and rage. And while he circled, he watched the club so as to dodge it if it was thrown by Franco. For he was become wise in the way of clubs. The driver went about his work, and he called to Buck when he was ready to put him in his old place in front of Dave. Buck retreated 2 or 3 steps. Franco followed him up, whereupon he again retreated. After some time of this, Franco threw the club, thinking that Buck feared a thrashing. But Buck was in open revolt. He wanted not to escape a clubbing, but to have the leadership. It was his by right. He had earned it, and he would not be content with less. Perrault took a hand. Between them they ran him about for a better part of an hour. They threw clubs at him. He dodged. They cursed him, and his fathers, and mothers before him, and all his seed to come after him down to the remotest generation, and every hair on his body and drop of blood in his veins. And he answered curse with snarl, and kept out of their reach. He did not try to run away, but retreated around and around the camp, advertising plainly that when his desire was met, he would come in and be good. Well, he earned it. He murdered the leader, and they've tried to insert their own candidate, but Buck is saying, "Hey, motherfuckers, that's my spot. Dude doesn't want it, obviously. Give me my fucking spot." And they're like, no. You're not in charge. We're in charge. But they're not in charge. If they were in charge, they would have just left him, probably, right? Right, Wyatt Earp? I'm just glad you stopped sticking your claws in me. Where were we? Okay. Franco sat down and scratched his head. Perrault looked at his watch and swore. Time was flying, and they should have been on the trail, an hour gone. Franco scratched his head again. He shook it and grinned sheepishly at the courier, who shrugged his shoulders in sign that they were beaten. Then Franco went up to where Solix stood and called Buck. Buck laughed as the dogs laugh. Yet kept his distance. Franco unfastened Solix's traces, put him back in his old place. The team stood harnessed to the sled in an unbroken line, ready for the trail. There was no place for Buck, save at the front. Once more Franco called. Once more Buck laughed and kept away. Oh, baby. "Throw down the club," Perrault commanded. Franco complied, whereupon Buck trotted in, laughing triumphantly, and swung around into position at the head of the team. His traces were fastened, and the sled broken out. And with both men running, they dashed out onto the river trail. Highly as a dog driver and forevalued Buck. With his 2 devils he found while the day was yet young, and that he had undervalued. At a bound, Buck took up the duties of leadership, and where judgment was required, and quick thinking and quick acting, he showed himself the superior even of Spitz, of whom Franco had never seen an equal. Oh, baby. Fucking Buck is going hard. Him's the boss. Him's king again in the wild. He was king on Judge Miller's place, and now he's the fucking king of the wild. Let's motherfucking go, Buck. Hell yeah. Motherfucking Buck, go. But it was in giving the law and making his mates live up to it that Buck excelled. Dave and Solix did not mind the change in leadership. It was none of their business. Their business was to toil, and toil mightily in the traces. So long as that were not interfered with, they did not care what happened. Billy, the good-natured, could lead for all they cared, so long as he kept order. The rest of the team, however, grown unruly during the last days of Spitz, and their surprise was great now that Buck proceeded to lick them into shape. Pike, who pulled at Buck's heels, and who never put an ounce more of his weight against the breastband than he was compelled to do, was swiftly and repeatedly shaken for loafing, and ere the first day was done, he was pulling more than ever before in his life. The first night in camp, Joe, the sour one, was punished roundly, a thing that Spitz had never succeeded in doing. Buck simply smothered him by virtue of superior weight, and cut him up until he ceased snapping and began to whine for mercy. Oh, Buck's becoming a fucking badass. General Buck. The general tone of the team picked up immediately. It recovered its old-time solidarity, and once more the dogs leaped as one in the traces at the Rink Rapids. 2 native huskies, Teak and Kuna, were added, and certainly with which Buck broke them in and took away Franco's breath. "Never seen such a dog as that, Buck," he cried. "No, never. Him worth $1,000. By golly. What you say, Perrault?" And Perrault nodded. He was ahead of the record then, and gaining day by day. The trail was in excellent condition, well packed and hard, and there was no new fallen snow with which to contend. It was not too cold. The temperature dropped to 50 below zero and remained there the whole trip. The men rode and ran by turn, and the dogs were kept on the jump with but infrequent stoppages. The 30-mile river was comparatively coated with ice, and they covered in one day going out what had taken them 10 days coming in. In one run, they made a 60-mile dash from foot of Lake LaBarge to White Horse Rapids, across Marsh Tagish and Bennett, 70 miles of lakes. They flew so fast, the man whose turn it was to run towed behind the sled at the end of the rope, and on the last night of the second week, they topped White Pass and dropped down the sea slope, with the lights of Skagway and of the shipping at their feet. It was a record run, each day for 14 days, and they averaged 40 miles for 3 days. Perrault and Franco threw chests up and down the main street of Skagway, and were deluged with invitations to drink, while the team was the constant center of worship. Crowd of dog busters and mushers. Then 3 or 4 Western bad men aspired to clean out the town were riddled like timber boxes for their pains, and public interest turned other to idols. Next came official or orders. Official or orders. The fuck? Next came official. Oh, next came official orders. Franco called Buck to him, threw his arms around him, wept over him, and that was the last Franco and Peralt. And that was the last of Franco and Peralt. Like other men, they had passed out of Buck's life for good. Oh, sad. A Scotch half-breed took charge of him and his mates, and in company with a dozen other dog teams, he started back over the weary trail to Dawson. It was no light running now, nor record time, but heavy toil each day, with a heavy load behind. For this was the mail train, carrying word from the world of men who sought gold under the shadow of the pole. Buck did not like it, but he bore up well to the work, taking pride in it after a manner of Dave and Solix, and seeing his mates, whether they prided in it or not, did their fair share. It was monotonous. It was a monotonous life. I think most of us can identify with the monotonous life. Jesus Christ. Thanks, bud. It was a monotonous life, operating with machine-like regularity. One day was very like another. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! Praise Buck! Very much. Where were we? Operating like with machine-like regularity. One day was very much like another. At a certain time each morning the cooks turned out, fires were built, and breakfasts were eaten. Then while some broke camp, others harnessed the dogs, and they were underway an hour or so. Before the darkness which gave warning of the dawn, at night, camp was made. Some pitched the flies, others cut firewood and pine boughs for the beds, and still others carried water or ice for the cooks. Also, the dogs were fed. To them this was the one feature of the day, though it was good to loaf around after the fish was eaten for an hour or so with the other dogs, of which there were 50 and odd. There were fierce fighters among them, but 3 battles with the fiercest brought Buck to mastery, so that when he bristled and showed his teeth, they got out his way, because he's a motherfucking pimp. Buck's the pimp dog of the North. Okay. Best of all, perhaps, he loved to lie near the fire, hind legs crouched under him, forelegs stretched out front, head raised and eyes blinking dreamily. Oh, bless you, Mr. Wyatt Earp, you sneezy, gross bastard. Yeah, you sneezed all over my foot. Thank you very much. We were reading about a puppy in the north. Anyway. Legs stretched out in front of him, head raised, and eyes blinking dreamily at the flames. Sometimes he thought of Judge Miller's big house. Yeah, sometimes he thought of Judge Miller's big house in the sun-kissed Santa Clara Valley, and of the cement swimming tank. You don't like this pro-puppy propaganda? What is wrong with you? You don't like this pro-puppy propaganda? Meow. and Isabel, the Mexican hairless, and Toots, the Japanese pug. But oftener, that is not a fucking word. Oftener is not a word. It is in this book, I swear to God. Oftener is not a word. But oftener he remembered the do not fucking do that, bro. Stop. You can't do that. You can't. Like, that's painful, you slobber knocker. Stop slobbering on me and stop sticking your nails inside of my fleshy fucking shit. We're trying to finish this fucking book, Wilder. Oh, but oftener he remembered the man in the red sweater, the death of Curly, the great fight with Spitz, and the good things he had eaten or would like to eat. He was not homesick. The Sandland was very dim and distant, and such memories had no power over him. Far more potent were the memories of his heredity that gave things he had never seen before a seeming familiarity. The insects, which were but the memories of his ancestors, become habits, which had lapsed in later days, and still later in him, quickened and became alive again. Sometimes as he crouched there, blinking dreamily at the flames, it seemed that the flames were of another fire, and that as he crouched by this other fire, he saw another and different man from the half-breed cook before him. This other man was shorter of leg and longer of arm, with muscles that were stringy and knotty rather than rounded and swelling. The hair of this man was long and matted, and his head slanted back under it from the eyes. He uttered strange sounds and seemed very much afraid of the darkness, into which he peered continually, clutching in his hand, which hung midway between his knee and foot, a stick with a heavy stone made fast to the end. He was all but naked and raged. He raged and fire scorched his all but naked, a ragged and fire-scorched skin hanging partway down his back. But on his body there was much hair, in some places across the chest and shoulders, down the outside of his arms and thighs. It was matted into almost a thick fur. He did not stand erect, but with trunk inclined forward from hips, on legs that bent at the knees. About his body there was peculiar springiness, or resiliency, almost cat-like, and a quick alertness as one who lived in the perpetual fear of things seen and unseen. They said the word cat. Did you like that, Wyatt Earp, you little dick? Anyway, at other times this hairy man squatted by the fire, with head between his legs, and slept. On such occasions, his elbows were on his knees, his hands clasped above his head as though to shed rain by the hairy arms, and beyond that fire, in the circling darkness, Buck could see many gleaming coals, 2 by 2, always 2 by 2, which he knew to be the eyes of great beasts of prey, and he could hear the crashing of their bodies through the undergrowth, and the noises they made in the night, and dreaming there by the Yukon bank with lazy eyes blinking at the fire, these sounds and sights of another world would make the hair to rise along his back and stand on end across his shoulders and up his neck, till he whimpered low and suppressedly or growled softly, and the half-breed cook shouted at him, "Hey, you buck, wake up!" Whereupon the other world would vanish, and the real world would come into his eyes, and he would get up, yawn, stretch as though he had been asleep. It was a hard trip, with the Mel behind them. Other side striving to leap inside his traces and get between them and the sled, and all while whining and yelping and crying with grief and pain. The half-breed tried to drive him away with a whip, but he paid no heed to the stinging lash, and the man had not the heart to strike harder. Dave refused to run quietly on the trail behind the sled, where the going was easy, but continued to flounder alongside in the soft snow, where the going was most difficult, till exhausted. Then he fell, and lay where he fell, howling what the fuck? And lay where he fell, howling languorously. What in the actual fuck? I've never seen that word in my life. As long as the train of sledge churned by. With the last remnant, I've read this book multiple times. I don't think I can honestly say I haven't seen that word before. I probably just skipped it a bunch of times. Anyway, with the last remnant of his strength, he managed to stagger along behind till the train made another stop, when he floundered past the sleds to his own, where he stood alongside Solix. His driver lingered a moment to get a light for his pipe from the man behind. Then he returned and started his dogs. They swung out on the trail with remarkable lack of exertion, turned their heads uneasily, and stopped in surprise. The driver was surprised, too. The sled had not moved. He called his comrades to witness the sight. Dave had bitten through both Solix's traces and was standing directly in front of the sled in his proper place. He pleaded with his eyes to remain there. The driver was perplexed. His comrades talked of how dogs could break its heart through being denied the work that killed it, and recalled instances where they had known where dogs too old for toil or injured had died because they were cut out of the traces. Also, they held it in mercy, since Dave was to die anyway, that he should die in the traces, heart easy and content. So he was harnessed in again, and proudly he pulled as of old, though more than once he cried out involuntarily from the bite of his inward hurt. Several times he fell down and was dragged in the traces, and once the sled ran upon him, so that he limped thereafter on one of his hind legs. You need to stop fussing around, Mr. Kitty. This is a very sad part. This poor old dog knows nothing but to work. Do you know how many poor old dogs are out there, and that's all they know is to work, and retirement kills them because they don't know what to do after they're told, hey, you don't have to work anymore. And they just have no purpose, and then they just die. It's sad, and don't put your claws in my fucking leg. Just chill. Chill, Wyatt Earp. We're almost done with this chapter. Chill the fuck out. But he held out till camp was reached, when his driver made a place for him by the fire. Morning found him too weak to travel. At harness up time, he tried to crawl to his driver, but What the fuck? By convulsive efforts, he got to his feet, staggered, and fell. Then he wormed his way forward, slowly toward where the harness were being put on his mates. He would advance his foreleg and drag upon his body with sort of a hitching movement. When he would advance his forelegs and hitch ahead again for a few more inches, his strength left him, and the last his mates saw of him, he lay gasping in the snow and yearning toward them, but they could not hear him mournfully howling till they passed out of sight behind a belt of river timber. You want outside? Go outside, bitch face. You're interrupting the podcast. Jesus. These goddamn children. These goddamn children. Here the train was halted. The Scotch half-breed slowly retraced his steps to the camp. And the Scotch half-breed was... Here the train was halted. The Scotch half-breed slowly retraced his steps to the camp. They had left. The men ceased talking. A revolver shot rang out. The men came back hurriedly. The whip snapped. The belts tinkled merrily. The sledge churned along the trail. Buck knew, and every dog knew, what had taken place behind the belt of river trees. Oh. Oh. That's retirement, folks. It's a bullet to the brain. I don't know what to tell you. That's part one. That's part one of the first episode of The Drunk Narrator. And I'm feeling pretty fucking tipsy. And why it's outside. So, crack a book, crack a beer. We'll see you next time. Let's fucking go.